Hi, I'm Jean Schumacher, founder of Simply Plant Based, where I have programs to help you to change your health destiny, including the Plant Based Academy, where I provide help, support, guidance, and resources to switch to a plant-based lifestyle, as well as the Pregnancy Advantage, where Dr. Deborah Shapiro, OBGYN, she and I help women to get their bodies pregnant ready or to help heal their bodies if dealing with infertility issues. Today, I have the privilege of connecting with Nelson Campbell from PlantPure Nation, and he has a new film out, From Food to Freedom. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here today.
It's nice to be here, Gene, and thanks so much for your interest in not just the film, but everything we've done in the past and for all that you do to help further the cause.
Well, first, I got to say thank you for all that you and your family do to keep the plant-based movement going. I mean, you are like a true visionary with a pure heart, and I just wanted to say thank you and say how truly grateful I am.
Okay, thanks.
Well, you have a new movie coming out called From Food to Freedom. Tell us about this new venture.
I'll go back in time a little bit. We initially had a vision for a film that we were going to shoot in New York City. And this was a film that was going to focus on a project that we were planning to engage in up there with a big healthcare partner. And I won't go into all of the details, but there were some sort of internal politics that ended up undermining, internal politics not on our side, but on their side, that ended up undermining the opportunity that we thought we had. In the initial vision that we had for the film, we were going to do an immersion program in Greensboro as a prelude, as kind of a first chapter to this bigger story up in New York. And so we did the project in Greensboro, but then when the bigger story didn't happen in New York, we took what we did in Greensboro and we turned that into the movie. And actually, it turned out really well, I think. And, and that's oftentimes the case when you're trying to do something that's, maybe entrepreneurial. Things don't go according to plan. And so you're always having to scramble and figure out how to make something out of what you've got.
Wow.
So anyway, so that's how the film came to be. And so we did this live-in immersion that we did in Greensboro. And I'm not going to give away all the details of the storyline because I want people to watch the film. I'll just say enough to kind of tantalize the viewer. We took a group of people who had type 2 diabetes. We're all taking insulin. And we brought them to a house in Greensboro where we had a live-in physician, Dr. Lori Marbus. A lot of people know her.
She's amazing.
2 great chefs, including my wife, Kim, and our good friend, Fernando Peralta. And for 10 days, we fed them whole food, plant-based foods, and they were constantly monitored 24/7, including their glucose levels. And then we just watched to see what happened. And so during the course of the film, you do see some miraculous healing. We also caught up with folks 6 months later, and we learned some things there. But the film also provided an opportunity for us to digress and to help educate the viewer on the connection of food and nutrition to chronic disease, to immunity, and to the COVID pandemic.
Well, that leads right into my next question, because I did an interview with a plant-based family. This was a couple of years ago when COVID first was coming out and people were getting hit hard. And they were 3 generations in the same home. All of them just had pretty mild symptoms, with the worst being the grandparents who ran a fever, about 102 for 3 days, the parents for 2 days, and then their children, 1 day, low-grade fever. That's it. No ongoing issues, nothing. So I love that you focus on the connection between the fact that most people who died with COVID had underlying health issues. Talk to us about this powerful connection.
In the very beginning of the pandemic, we saw the initial surge in Italy. In fact, I was in Italy at the time. I had an opportunity for a meeting there in Rome. And so it was starting to happen, then came back, actually went on the holistic health cruise the week later which also, it's an Italian cruise boat. So there are a lot of folks from Italy there. And then when we got home that week, Kim and I both got sick with symptoms of COVID. It was before testing, so I think we probably had it. But anyways, not long after that, the Italian government had commissioned a study looking at the folks who were dying. What they found was that of the people dying had pre-existing conditions that were mostly chronic diseases that are nutritionally related. And so that was astounding. And I thought, when that study came out, I thought, man, this is awful. What a horrendous thing to happen. But, now that this is happening, the government's going to have to tell people, somehow or another, they're going to have to explain this information to people of the connection of food to disease and immunity. And of course, that never happened, as we know, through the entire pandemic. Nothing much was really said about this. But yes, you are right. Later, the CDC followed up with the study, and they found 95% of people dying had pre-existing conditions. And, the only reason there might have been a little discrepancy between their number and the number from Italy is, there are a lot of people walking around who have undiagnosed conditions, but they have, they have these conditions kind of in process underway. So, when you eat plant-based, obviously it doesn't mean you're not going to get COVID. Kim and I think we might have had it, a couple times actually, we were tested later. We know we had it later. So, you're still going to get things. You're still going to get viruses, and, and you know what? You might get a nasty flu now and then. I actually just came off of one because, there are other factors too, the stress in your life. And so, I've been under stress for things relating to my work, and that plays a factor too. So you can still get sick and you can get, some rough symptoms. But what made COVID so bad is the folks who ended up in the hospital or died. And so, in those instances, your underlying health is absolutely key. And what impacts that? It's the food that we eat.
Yes. No question, 100%. And I still haven't gotten COVID yet. And I have been healthy since all of this started, and I'm 100% whole food, plant-based, no issues, no ifs, ands, or buts. So yeah. Oh, well, you did this immersion with 6 people, all with type 2 diabetes. Okay, so you have your pick of all the chronic diseases out there. Yeah. Why diabetes?
Well, a couple reasons. One is some studies have suggested that up to 40% of the people in the US who died of COVID had diabetes, mostly type 2 diabetes. So that was a big underlying condition. The other reason that we chose folks with diabetes is because the healing effects are rapid with food. You can see them and you can measure them. You can see the glucose levels changing. It's easy to see and to measure, and it happens quickly. Every filmmaker has a purpose in making a film. And we wanted to make the point that healing happens fast. When the CDC is talking about what can we do to protect ourselves, washing our hands, socially distancing, masking, those things, the things that they repeated over and over, they had a certain mantra that they repeated. And in the film, we don't take a position on any of that. We are neutral. We didn't want to engage in any of that. We didn't want to wade into any of that divisive debate that's divided people politically. We didn't want our film to be partisan or political. We didn't want to get into any of that. Our focus is solely food. But anyways, that was the mantra of the CDC, but yet nothing was said about food and diet. As we point out in the film, if you go back and you look at the website that they had up during most of the pandemic, they had a page with recommendations, precautions that you could take. Nutrition wasn't even on the page.
Why?
And,
Why?
and and yet if you have type 2 diabetes, you can heal rapidly. It's not like, eat well and your diabetes won't get worse, or eat well and it'll progress more slowly, or eat well and if you do it for, a year, maybe you'll get better. No, eat well and within days you get better. And these are the folks dying of COVID, and yet that information was never communicated.
It's so sad. It's just so sad. And I'm so glad you're bringing this out in the film. Well, was
Mhm.
it difficult? Because I know food is always a big issue, like, oh my God, I could never eat that way. Was it difficult for the participants to adjust to the meals? And what were some of the types of foods that you were preparing?
Well, we had picky eaters there for sure. We had skeptic there. There really weren't a lot of challenges actually, because it was planned so well and we kind of pampered them. The food was definitely not a challenge. Obviously, there might have been a dish or two that some of the folks didn't like as much as other dishes. They liked the food. Again, that's a myth that we discuss in the film. Eating plant-based is not sacrificial. It could taste great. And this, Gene, that our style is a little more into the comfort food category. So we always aim for food that kind of replicates the flavors and textures that people are used to, the kind of food that they grew up on, some of those flavors and textures. And Kim is an absolute artist when it comes to creating recipes. So she's really honed her craft, and that's what her focus is. And our chef friend Fernando Peralta also, he has a similar philosophy, and he and Kim together just did amazing with the food. That
Well,
was one of the best part of the program.
I got to have a shout out to your wife because, oh my God, her newest cookbook, Plant Pure
Yep.
Comfort Food. I think it's her
Yep.
best yet. I do. I just,
It is. And, I taste a lot of the recipes that she's making. And so I can personally attest to this, that is her best one.
that's a standard thing in my house too, because I'll be making new
Uh,
dishes. Is this a make again, dear?
yeah.
Yes, we have that same thing here in our house, but not to your level. Your wife is at Jedi level. She's
Yeah.
amazing.
She's fantastic.
Some people do find it hard to be plant-based because they may not know how to cook. I mean, there is a little bit of learning curve to this style of cooking without oil and, just making it taste good. So, or people may not have time to prep food. And I know you have some programs at PlantPure Nation. So talk to us about some of these programs and where you can get food already made for you.
Well, it's getting more expensive these days to buy prepared foods. And with, the current economy and inflation, a lot of people out there are struggling. And so we're always trying to think about the folks in the middle, you know, the folks maybe who are struggling a little more, how do we get the message and affordable foods out to these folks? And there are a lot of people struggling today. I don't think that prepared foods is a good solution. I think, people need to learn how to make these foods at home and from scratch. It's actually very affordable. It's a lot easier than people understand. And you just have to put a little elbow grease into it, take a little responsibility, and just do a little work. And the work will pay dividends in the form of health and energy, vitality. We are trying to help people, though, in this regard. We have a project that we've been working on at PlantPure. It's still just in the idea phase, but it's getting close to being materialized. Kim has led the effort on this, but we are creating a line of, we're referring to them now as healthy helper products. So these are basically dry packs, all non-GMO ingredients. And the best way to describe them is that they're meal bases. So each pack can be utilized in recipes, and each pack can be utilized in multiple recipes. So a lineup of, say, I think we're starting with 9. We're going to have close to 50 recipes that are accessible or will be accessible on our website. So you'll be able to get these and then have them in your pantry, and then you just have to go shop for the add-ins, your produce, fresh or frozen, your soy milk or whatever few add-ins are required. And you're still making your food from scratch. So it's affordable. This is a very
like Hamburger Helper,
yeah, yeah.
back in the day.
So this is affordable. It's not, a fully prepared meal, but it's something you can do at home, and it's easy and, inexpensive.
Are you still doing the Publix, the frozen foods?
We are. We have some products at Publix. We also have a new product line that we've created that we're going to be introducing into supermarkets, and we've already gotten a couple customers for those new products. So we're continuing that business in supermarkets.
That's awesome, because a lot of the processed ones, even if they're vegan, still contain a lot of ingredients you really don't want to be consuming. So, and I just love that yours are just really clean. And oh my God, they taste amazing. So, wow. Well, from the movie, I loved that you went back after 6 months to follow up, because it's one thing to be in this immersion and have food served to you 3 times a day and you get the support you need. But when you get home, it's hard not to fall back into your old ways. Support is one of the key elements. So talk to us about the pod communities and how they can help avoid the daily sad traps. And by the way, we have plant-based Cape Cod up here, which is a pod. So loving it.
We've found in the past that there are challenges when people go back home. The biggest challenge always is motivating someone to do this and to really take responsibility. And so, the front end education is important. Giving them the experience of better health is important. And getting them to make that decision, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take responsibility. And by the way, we talk about this in the film, this idea of taking responsibility. And the participants themselves talk about how this decision to take responsibility is actually, through that, they've sensed that they can gain greater freedom in their lives. So there's a sense of a connection between taking responsibility and gaining freedom in your life. Sometimes I think we overlook that, but there are other practical challenges that people face, and food is, the big one. So, learning how to do this, and, a lot of people also are challenged, in restaurants. And so a lot of people consume a lot of their food outside the home. So if you live in a community where you don't have healthy options, that becomes a challenge.
It's true.
In those instances, you're going to have to make the decision, like, I'm going to eat more at home. Sometimes people have other stresses in their life. They may have financial stress. They may have certain kinds of emotional stress. And if you are feeling these stressors, or you're not feeling good about yourself for other reasons, you're not really going to be all that concerned about what you eat or your health. So, these are factors too. There's multiple ways to address these things, but one of the most effective ways is simply having connection to others. So being in community, being able to go someplace where you can be with other people who are on your journey. And not just, at the event, whatever the event might be. A lot of our pods meet over potlucks, but just forming friendship, having a circle of friends that you can cook with, talk to, be with, who you can share with, and who maybe you can help you through the stresses of your life. So I think community is such an important part. You know, we find that when people are alone and they're trying to make this change in their life and they're detached from these kinds of supportive relationships, it's really hard.
It is. New Year's Eve, I just had, we had an awesome potluck with, 6 couples, and we did game night, and it was just so much fun to not have to explain, and worry about the food that, oh my God, can I eat this? What's in it? Is there a surprise that I don't know about? It was really nice. And having that community support is priceless. It really is.
Yeah. And I think, the common interest in plant-based can help to bring people together.
Yes.
But then the process of coming together, again, it's an opportunity to actually form new friendship, new social connections that have nothing to do with the food and go above and beyond the food. And, we are hardwired to want connection.
Yes.
We require it. And when we don't have it, all kinds of weird things can start to happen to us, and emotionally and mentally. And that's one of the hard parts of our modern world. Yes. Is community oftentimes is not what it needs to be.
Oh, I have to agree.
There are a lot of folks out there who have stresses and who could use support and who don't have it.
Oh, it's true. Well, you did another movie before this, the PlantPure Nation. How would you compare the message in PlantPure Nation to the message in this film?
In one sense, there's a lot of similarity, because both films were explaining this powerful truth, and we're also noting how it's been suppressed. But in the first film, we used a story in Kentucky to demonstrate in a very vivid way, how powerful interests can manipulate the political system to suppress a truth like this. And we did something in that film that I haven't seen in any other films. It's quite unique in that we were able to really get, behind the and into the political process, and to get our cameras there so that we could bring the viewer into it so they could see it firsthand. And then, of course, all through the film, we digress into various topics. So it's a very educational film, but it's very story driven. But it's very much a story in Kentucky and taking people behind the scenes. In the second film, From Food to Freedom, we just really show in full living color, the healing effects of a plant-based diet and how this affects people who are healing, not just physically, but emotionally. And then we, as we see that, we're able to digress into these bigger points relating to the pandemic, truth, the media, the pharmaceutical industry, all of this.
Well, you are considering a third documentary, this one focused on the connection between food choices to climate change to biodiversity. Talk to us about the link between these three and your food choices, the climate changes we are clearly experiencing, and biodiversity.
Yeah, so this is a really complex topic, but it's something that I've been interested in literally since I was a little boy. I've always had this weird fascination with weather and climate, and I didn't study climate science, but I read everything I can get my hands on, and it's just a great interest of mine. But I don't know if we're going to do this third documentary that I'm envisioning, because things change. Depends on, for example, if we have the resources to do it. That's the biggest thing. But I would love to do a documentary that really looks at this food climate connection in a deeper, more provocative way. Most people don't realize that there's actually a very clear pathway, not just to sort of mitigate or slow climate change, but to actually reverse it by regenerating our planet, or allowing our planet to regenerate. We actually, through our nonprofit, we supported an initial study by a well-known climate scientist, Dr. Atul Jain, looking at the contribution of agriculture to greenhouse gas emissions. But we actually have a longer-term strategy that we would like to be able to fund. And I would like to use this film to issue a call to action for people to help fund this. So it's a series of studies that would look at what would happen if we went plant-based. How much land would be freed up from animal agriculture? How much of that would naturally regenerate? How much could be regenerated through more active human intervention? How much carbon would that draw down over the next 20 years? We also want to look at issues around palm oil production and rice production. As it turns out, there are adjustments that can be made in rice production that would eliminate up to 90% of the methane emissions caused by that. Of course, the issue of palm oil production is really important as well. None of us should be eating palm oil. And the other area of interest is marine. There are interesting strategies and ideas for how we can take a regenerative approach with the oceans to pull down lots of additional carbon. So this series of studies would sum to a thesis about a regenerative approach to reversing climate change. And Dr. Chain's already done preliminary calculations, and the potential for this is far greater than people understand. There is a clear solution to climate change. And unfortunately, a lot of the discussion that's happening today, I liken it to the effects of cocaine or drug on a person. Is it sort of feels good, but it's an illusion. The things that we're talking about today, yes, I agree. We need to develop renewable technologies, and we need to do this. And by the way, there are more efficient ways to do that than what we're currently doing through a lot of the political policies that have been promoted. But obviously, I agree with all of that. But that by itself, it's not going to solve the problem in time. We need to utilize the healing capacity of the planet. Just like the human body can heal itself quickly, the planet can heal itself quickly if we get out of the way.
Right.
It's the same principle. It's the same principle. And so, we need to look at this. And unfortunately, what's happening today is there's a lot of discussion about this idea of using aerosols to dim the sun. And people don't understand this, and they always kind of give me the look that you're giving me now when I say this, but this is a debate that's been going on for years. And the Biden administration just this fall put a big chunk of funding into research to research the use of aerosols, spraying aerosols into the atmosphere to dim the sun. And so I'm just saying, people don't understand this, but this is an idea that's coming. And if this happens, it's kind of like the idea of using chemotherapy to somehow, quote, treat cancer. Okay, that doesn't really work. Yeah. Cancer is far more complicated. You can't just put a chemical in to kill some cancer cells here and then heal the body. It doesn't work that way. You have unintended consequences. And if we do this with aerosols, not only will we never see the blue in our sky again, the sky will be a hazy, kind of milky white, and it will always be that way. The blue of the sky will be a distant memory. There will be so many unintended consequences, and one of which is geopolitical strife, because some areas will get hurt, other areas will benefit. The moment that they do that is the beginning of the end. And so what we have to do is we have to lay out an alternative approach that's based on the healing capacity of the planet. And so I want to do a documentary that makes an argument for that. So I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, it's so powerful. And once that happens, there's no going back. There's
Mm-mm.
no going back. I mean, you were right. The unintended consequences are going to be huge and so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what other plans for 2023 do you have after this film is launched?
So we're going to be releasing the film. I encourage people, if they want to see the film, to go to plantpurecommunities.org and to subscribe, and we will update you with details as we get closer to the release. So we're going to release the film online initially with Food Revolution Network, and that's the organization that's led by Ocean Robbins and his father. And so that'll be sometime in March. And then after that, we may then get it on one of the streaming platforms like Netflix or Amazon, so it's more widely available. So right now our focus is on that, but once we get through that, and by the way, we're doing this in a way that will hopefully generate some resources into our nonprofit PlantPure communities. And assuming we have resources in PlantPure communities, we do have plans for producing additional media, such as the documentary that I just mentioned, but also shorter form media, shorter videos that highlight inspiring things that people are doing out in the pod network, kind of best practices. And so we want to be producing a constant stream of this. We also want to restart Kim's culinary show, cooking show. Food is at the center of all of this, and it's really critical. And Kim does such a great job, not just creating recipes, but educating. So we want that to be part of our media. So actually, we're referring to all of this as our pod stream. We also, over time, if we see things that our pods are doing that are successful, maybe we'll build resource kits that can be put on our website that can enable others in the pod network to learn about those strategies and resources to replicate those best practices in their own communities. So that's really what we're going to hopefully focus on: film release, and then more media, and then providing our pods with tangible resources to do things in their communities.
Well, one of the things we're starting, and we actually have a meeting this week, is to begin a restaurant campaign for here on Cape Cod, because there's not a lot of restaurants up here that offer plant-based options. So we are going out, we are hitting hard, and we are going to be beginning the restaurant campaign. So I love that you have this, and I love that you have this interactive map that people can see. This is brilliant.
Yeah, and again, they just go to plantpurecommunities.org. And by the way, Jean, as you're doing that, keep an inventory of everything that you use. And it may be that you've handouts,
right, that
you give to restaurant owners. There are things and resources and ideas that are part of what you're doing.
Right.
If we let me know what those things are, and maybe we can bottle that together and create a resource kit.
You already have a beautiful educational platform that takes you through the whole steps of how to reach out to the restaurants, what to say, what to do, how to approach them. And it's brilliant. So thank you so much for all of that, because this is going to be phenomenal resources. So
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you're right. We do have some basic ideas that we already share on the website. But what we hope that over time, as people are engaging in these things, that they're innovating themselves and they're creating, resources and ideas that we can incorporate, and then make available and share with the rest of the network.
100%, because that's what it's all about. We have to network and build this grassroots movement. And you've done a fabulous job from PlantPure Nation starting this grassroots movement. And you can look on this map to find pods that are near you. And if you don't have one near you, start one.
Exactly. It's easy to do. All you need is a couple of friends to meet over dinner, and you have a pod.
Exactly. Reaching out through churches and other areas, that's another place that we're going to be beginning and working on. And just reaching out, letting social media do its thing, and reaching out. It's so powerful. It's so powerful.
That's what it's going to take.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your new film. And it is brilliant. And I just say, well done to you. Seriously.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you, Gene. As I said, it's a different story than we had initially anticipated, but I think it turned out well, and it was a lot of fun to produce, that's for sure.
Well, you did an amazing job. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Gene, and thanks for your, continuous interest in what we do, and thanks for your what you do with your own pod and what you do with your podcast, and you're doing a lot of good work too. All right. See ya.